Thank you for bearing with me as I was a little bit late. You just cannot rely on the trains in this country. So thank you all for coming along this evening. I say sorry I'm a little bit late. I've got some introductory words I need to say. So please can I welcome everyone to this meeting of the Winchester Town Forum, taking place this evening in the Walton Suite in Winchester Guildhall. The time is 6:30 p.m. I'm Councillor Mark Reach, chairman of this meeting. The meeting's being live streamed and recorded on the council's YouTube channel. Subtitles are available, and advice on how to turn this on is set out on our website. Please everyone make sure their phones are on silent. And in the unlikely event that we have to evacuate the building, fire alarm will sound. Please follow the usual instructions given to you by the team. Could I welcome certainly members of the public, but Mr. Tate, could I welcome you to the meeting? And I'll invite you at the appropriate time to come forward and make your contribution, which we look forward to. So, turning to the agenda, do you have any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for absence received from Councillor Westwood. Thank you.
And do we have any disclosures of interests that need to be made? Councillor Todd.
Yeah, I need to declare a personal but non-prejudicial interest as a member of the County Council, since some of the issues relate to County Council business.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Thompson.
I think because we have the grants paper, just to say that I am the council's observer on the Play to the Crowd board, so I think I ought to just raise that.
Wonderful, thank you. No further declarations to be made? Wonderful. Move to chairperson's announcements. I would just like to, well, I would like to welcome County Councillor Dom Hiscock, who's here as well. Thank you for coming along, Dom. We do appreciate it. But I would particularly like to call out the efforts of Councillor Batho and Councillor Tippett Cooper, who's over there, for the excellent work they've been doing on the Community Speedwatch scheme since we last met. Some wonderful photographs of you two in high vis policing our streets. So thank you for those efforts. And the Town Forum applauds that. Minutes of the previous meeting, pages 5 to 10. Could I ask that we're happy with the minutes of the previous meeting and that they are accurate and that there are no amendments need to be made? Excellent. So we now move on to public participation. Mr. Tate, I think you want to speak on a couple of papers. Would you like to do that at the time? Just the one paper. Could you just let me know which one it is, please? The street markets, thank you. Thank you. So we'll move on to agenda item number 4, I think that's correct, which is the Town Forum grant programme. For this paper, so I'll be introducing it, slightly oddly from the chairman's seat, but thank you both for stepping up as well to field any of the difficult questions. So we are fortunate to have a flourishing voluntary and community sector, and the Town Forum community grant schemes continue to support organisations and help creative, cohesive, sustainable, resilient communities. The purpose of this paper is set out in the recommendations, but I would like first for all of us to note the achievement and the successes of the grant programmes in the past year. I would also like to encourage members who are sat around the table here this evening to continue to support the community engagement process. It's a really, really valuable scheme that we run, and I think we recognise that we got lots of really good bids, but we could get a better spread, particularly looking at councillor wise as in particular for your ward. So let's see if we can do better next time round. The paper is also going to deal with the difficult question of funding of the grants programme in future. I think we're all aware of the broader fiscal situation that the City Council and the Town Forum finds itself in. But I think we've got a good proposal as to how we will deal with that fairly without undoing or undermining the good work of the grants programme. Could I just pass over to you to talk through the paper, please? I'm not sure who's going to take the lead.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a few comments. Wasn't going to walk through the paper completely because obviously it's quite well set out. But one of the things I wanted to say was that I know in the past, in terms of the Town Forum, there's been some concern around how we've actually allocated the funding and how much funding we've allocated. But actually, in this last financial year, we've pretty much spent the budget. So I wanted to kind of make that, and it's been a good year for the team in terms of that, and that's on the backdrop of some of the other funding that as a council we provided, which is around the cost of living, and quite a lot of organisations within the town area have received that. So there has been quite a lot of funding going into the town area, whether it come out of the town forum budget or out of the general fund cost of living budget. One of the other things I wanted to talk about as well was around the community engagement and the member engagement. We tried to work quite hard on increasing our reach across the town and trying to engage our members and the communities in terms of supporting this programme. So that's something that we'll continue with going forward. The only other thing I wanted to mention was with regards to the challenge that we've been set for the £10,000 reduction for the next financial year. So we've put a proposal in with regards to reducing that from the one-off budget rather than any of the core funding that we currently allocate, which I think at this point in time, before we do any additional analysis, which we have been tasked with for the full grant programme, we don't really want to make any decisions on how that allocation would affect the other organisations that we currently fund. I think that's probably the cleanest way to do the allocation in this financial year. That was kind of it, because obviously the paper has quite a lot of information around some of the outcomes and some of the work that we've done with our grant recipients. Unless you wanted to add anything additional, Jane?
No.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful, and it's good paper. All the detail is in there. Are there any questions from members, please? Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed you sort of earmarked St Luke's, so I'm going to ask a question on St Luke's then. Where and how far does officers send this out to a community like St Luke's? So I noticed there's a couple of things referenced here, which is obviously St Luke's Church, which comes under the parish of Badgers Farm and Ollers Battery, but that's obviously benefited a coffee morning because the parish is in St Luke's, St Mark's. And then there was another reference of St Luke's getting some money for the community association. But where else does it go in the community rather than sort of earmarking and fingers pointing at members around the table today?
Do you mean where as in how it's allocated, or
where does it get advertised? That people in the community, like community groups, got the churches there, you've got New Life Church, you've got Selma School, got the Carol Centre. Where does it get publicised so we don't have another finger pointed at St Luke's?
Yeah, so we advertise it in lots of different places. So we've got quite a big social media following, both on our Winchester Grants Facebook pages and using the overall council pages. We have we have a newsletter that we send out that has a large email distribution list, and that includes people who we've historically had links with or we've awarded grants to, and we advertise in various newsletters. We hold funding events that we publicise to people. We use some of the other contacts and networks that we have, people like Community First, Action Hampshire, other networks that we have, organisations that we know, and we ask them to spread the word about our grants as well.
Councillor Scott, we also support the Carol Centre, and they're aware, so they're aware of the funding that we provide as well. I think we'd quite like to ask the members to help us to get that message out that there is actually funding out there, because we're just about to arrange for the project grants to be reopened. So that's something perhaps that for members we can talk about that a bit further. Thank you.
Another approach we're just going to try in the town now for the next couple of months is to have a drop-in session somewhere in one of the town wards where any interested groups can come and talk to me and the rest of the team about how to make an application. They can even bring their laptops along and we'll sit with them and help talk them through the process. So we're hoping that might encourage some new people to make applications too.
Thank you. I should just add, I wasn't finger pointing at St Luke. I just think it would be great to get better, spread across the city. And I didn't mean to forget you, Councillor Scott. How could I possibly forget you? It's just Charlie was sat over here and I could see him. Sorry, Councillor Wise was sat over here and I could see him. Does that answer your question, Councillor Scott? Are you happy with that?
Yeah, I think, again, not to be negative on St Luke's, we're under a bit of a cosh as a community. We do feel a bit sort of forgotten, and we've got some things that we need to discuss. Steve Lincoln sitting in the room, a leader, and Councillor Becker and Councillor Wise and myself, we're looking at trying to bit a boost in Stanmore, something like that. So we're a bit on the uppers and we want to really look forward to the future, what we could do with Stanmore. But you're right, it's a sort of lacking process at the moment, St Luke's, but it's a lovely community, Chair.
Indeed it is. Thank you very much. Councillor Cooper.
I think just building on that point a little bit, giving our excellent officers here an opportunity to kind of answer a question that might help address some of that. But noting the wards where these grants have been made, the organisations that the wards are in sort of based in, doesn't necessarily mean, in fact, it doesn't mean that that's the only place the organisations operate in. Indeed, the majority of these, I dare say, operate in all the city wards. But is that the case? Officers is my question.
Yes, quite. When an applicant applies to us for a grant, they're asked to state which ward they're either based in or that their project activity is happening in. So we try and get an idea so that you're aware of the spread of where the money's going. But it's really true to say that a lot of those town-based organisations are working with people from all over the town.
Very much. Are there any other questions on this paper? Wonderful. So if we go to the recommendations, which are back on page 11, we are requested to note points 1 through to 5. Can I take that they are noted by the town forum, please? Wonderful, thank you. Thank you. And then we are requested to approve under point 6 on page 12 of the agenda pack that the £10,000 budget reduction that was requested by the Winchester Town Account Informal Accounts Group will be achieved by a reduction to the project grant, which is detailed in the paper for financial year 24-25. Is that agreed, please? Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So we now turn to agenda item number 7, which is on the Winchester City Street Market Management Contract and Operating Policy, reference the cabinet paper that's referenced in the pack. Welcome Andrew Costello to the table. Mr. Tate, would you like to speak after we've walked through the paper, or would you like to do it now? Absolutely, thank you very much. Mr. Costello, you have to talk us through the paper, please.
I think Councillor Thompson would like to make an introductory word.
Councillor Thompson.
Yes. Yes. Thank you very much. I'm really pleased to be bringing this report forward to the town forum today. The operation of our street markets in Winchester always sparks interest and quite a wide-ranging debate. And I know that how it operates, the quality of the stalls, the way it looks and its attractiveness are all important aspects which we all feel very strongly about. The current markets contract ran out several years ago, and it's now time that we go out to procure a market operator for an initial term of 3 years. So today we are asking the town forum to comment on the vision as set out in this paper, as well as the draft street market operating policy, the selection process and weighting criteria, and the communications and transition plan. This paper obviously comes before you tonight, and the the comments that we make will go forward to the Business and Housing Committee next week and then on to Cabinet in October for overall approval. So by way of background, in 2022, the retail group produced a report on our markets, and you can see their findings on page 53 of the report in paragraph 12.16, I think. And they made a number of recommendations on how we might improve our market offer. These included better signage and branding, as well as suggestions around how we might expand the market further by offering early, evening and themed markets. So a new market contract is very timely, and we have an exciting opportunity to ensure that these recommendations are reflected in the new contract and operating policy. And it's also given us the opportunity to look at our policies surrounding the operation of our street markets and see how we might improve the variety of and number of stalls, and looking at whether we have the right mix of products on offer. It also gives us the chance to really increase our offer, support the high street and add to its vibrancy. Themed markets, for example, a makers market, capitalising on the large creative sector we have in and around the district, could be, I think, useful additions. It could also include a young person's market, encouraging students from our universities to set up shop and encourage young entrepreneurs. This supports our council plan in creating a vibrant economy, encouraging startups and increasing the attractiveness of Winchester. On branding and signage, Town Forum members are aware that we are looking at new gazebos and signage funded principally by the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, and this should really tie in nicely with the awarding of a new contract too. I think we all recognise the importance that having a vibrant market in our town centre contributes hugely to driving up footfall in the town. It helps support local businesses and independents and is a cost-effective way of encouraging startups of very small businesses. And indeed, we have seen some who have had a market stall and then gone on to move into permanent business. So I hope you've all had a chance to read the papers, and I look forward to questions and any comments that the Town Forum may have. Thank you.
Is there anything you'd like to add, Mr. Costello?
It's an extremely comprehensive update. I don't think I've got anything to add to that for the moment. Thank you.
Mr. Tate, would you like to come forward, please? I think you're aware of the rules, so please, at your leisure.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to address the Town Forum. I have been a strong and hopefully vocal supporter of the market ever since it moved from its old location in Middlebrook Street to the High Street back in 2011. Initially, many residents and a number of councillors and shops raised concerns about the competition that the market would have with the High Street. But over the years, it became very apparent to the existing shops that the market significantly improved their trading conditions. The truth of this has been seen by the number of new businesses who have come to the High Street since the market relocated there. I always find it interesting that Flat White's predates both Pret-a-Manger and Starbucks. I think that's quite telling. The very authoritative Mary Porter's report strongly endorsed the value of markets in making the high streets more resilient. And Dame Sharon White from John Lewis is saying essentially the same thing. So there's more information to come, we hope. Winchester has very low shop empty vacancy rates. And I know from my own work experience that there are many major retail and hospitality businesses who are keen to come to Winchester. So even the units which are empty, invariably there's a story behind why they're not occupied. It's interesting that the picture on the front of the operating policy document shows the stalls in the upper section of the High Street outside the Ivy, but since COVID they've not been there. I would strongly advocate returning to this area, as it would be supported by the businesses and it worked well in that location, and it would also free up space from the units which will be lost when Debenhams refurbishment and occupation is done. The successful operation of the high street market is based on many issues. Cleanliness of public lavatories is very important. Thank you, Councillor Todd. How far the stall holders have to park and go from their parking to the stall, very important for security reasons and the operation of a one-man, one-operator stall. I hope the council will reconsider where market traders park. I think that's quite an important thing. Effective market management isn't a given. The farmers market has deteriorated over the years, as opposed to the Winchester High Street market, which has thrived. And I think that's an important lesson for all of us. So it's not a given that markets work, and the experience in the south of England in other locations shows that they have to be treated very sensitively. Thank you for the opportunity to address you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tate, and I think we all recognise that you're a very keen advocate of the market. I myself would recommend everyone to try the Thai food stall, which has recently opened. It does an excellent pad Thai. You raised a couple of points in there. I saw Councillor Thompson was noting down. Would you like to respond, Councillor Thompson, please? I think it was particularly around parking and the farmers market as well.
Yes, thank you very much. I absolutely support what Mr. Tate has said, and I'm very pleased that he remains to be a strong supporter of the markets in Winchester. And I agree, we do have to treat the re-tendering and the re-procurement of markets very sensitively, and it's not a given that everything will still be thriving when the new contract comes in, and we just have to be mindful of that and handle it sensitively. I absolutely agree. Cleanliness of the toilets, well, we brought a paper to Cabinet yesterday on exactly that issue, and we have a strategy to improve the toilet provision around centre of town. And parking's an interesting one, and I will take that away and discuss that with officers. And I don't have a sort of, I don't know whether Mr. Gostenlow might want to comment on that, but I don't have an answer for you on that right now. I certainly have met with the farmers market, and I agree it's really a shadow of its former self. And I know that officers have been in touch with them, and we have been trying to encourage them to for them to encourage more stall holders, and I know they have gone through quite a difficult time, and I suspect you know the reasons for that too. But it is something that we want to encourage, and we would love to have a vibrant farmers market. I mean, we were the #1 destination for a farmers market for many years, and certainly when I first moved to Winchester, probably 18, 19 years ago now, it was one that you know, outstanding, I would say. So it is a shame that that has fallen away, and it is perhaps just a little reminder to us that we do just need to be sensitive around the operation of any market. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Are there questions from members, please, on this paper? I think Councillor Morris just picked Councillor Becker there.
So just a clarification, just my own possible limited understanding. On 2.1, the Winchester market forecast and budget, the expenditure for the forecast and the budget exactly matches, which is obviously a wonderful thing, but the income for the budget is about 50,000 more than is forecast. And would it be possible just to clarify this for the sake of my own understanding?
I wonder if Mr. Costello could comment on that, please.
Yeah, so I mean, the budget and the forecast figures are provided by our finance colleagues. I can't do the maths here. Are you suggesting there's a mathematical error? No, it's just the fact that the two expenditure figures balance.
Just wondering why they look the same in both columns.
I think the explanation is that the market is performing above expectations, so that forecast was just a forecast which has now been adjusted. But I think we'd have to confirm that with finance.
Yeah, apologies, I misunderstood the question. Absolutely, that is the case. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Becker.
Thank you. Sorry, it is working. Thank you for this paper. I'm a huge advocate for the market. I see Mr. Tate there most days that it's on. And I completely agree with what he says. I think it's complementary to the high street rather than competing with the high street, and brings a range of retailers for residents who may not shop at the shops on the high street but come into town to shop at the market. So thank you for that. My question relates to the public sector equality duty. You say that an an equality impact assessment has been completed, but there's not one attached to this paper. I know we've discussed this before, but there is the potential for the market to impact on people with disabilities. It's difficult to navigate the market with a buggy. I imagine it's even more difficult for someone in a wheelchair or a mobility scooter, and for people with visual impairments. So it'll be great to see that reflected in the final version of the strategy as it comes forward as that. Sorry, it's not a question, but can we have a commitment that it is being considered and that it is going to form part of?
Absolutely, Councillor Beck, and would just like to just confirm that we have drafted equality impacts assessment. More work will be done on that, and that will be part of the suite of papers that comes to Cabinet in October, and very much reflected through the policy as well.
Thank you. Can I suggest that a draft goes to who's going to Business and Housing, so they are able to see it and comment on it before the final version is completed?
We'll look into that. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you happy with that response? And I know this is something we picked up in the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Forum last night as well, this very point. So thank you, Councillor Becker. Thank you. Councillor Batho.
Thank you. I'd just like to welcome the report. Thank you very much, Mr. Costello. I'd just like to ask, following on from Councillor Becker's question in terms of access, one of the issues with the market on occasions is that the stall holders expand beyond the sort of area that they're actually allocated. What sort of criteria, what conditions are going to be put in place as part of the operating plan, and indeed any sort of redress to address that in terms of the policy, if you'd like to, or if you're able to answer that? Thank you.
Certainly, and that's an area that we're very aware of, and that is why in the policy we have done a lot of work on producing a sort of a GIS mapping plan. So there is a very clear layout and plan. There will be more work done on that almost creates a lined out 3 metre by 3 metre, 3 metre by 5 metre plan that clearly stipulates the exact geographic area of the pitch for each trader, and as part of the management contract and the management operating policy, the management contractor will be required to ensure that all traders retain within their agreed and approved space, and as us as officers through that contract management programme will spot check those sorts of things.
Happy with that, Councillor Batho?
Thank you. And I noticed that there are obviously opportunities to withdraw the rights for market traders to actually would that, or persistent sort of infringement of that, would that then qualify for that type of action?
Yeah, so regular periodic infringement of the operating policy would bring about the situation for the market operating company to come and have a discussion with us about potentially looking at the ongoing basis of a trader being able to trade, and that's sort of outlined in the policy.
Thank you.
Councillor Prest.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to echo everyone's comments praising this report. Councillor Thompson and Mr. Costello, thank you. I'm actually interested in what happens next. If this report goes through, it feels like the strength of it is a chance to further enhance the ambience and the atmosphere of the centre of town on market days. As someone who's been to a few European markets before, there is a relationship between the market stalls and the restaurants and cafes around being able to have tables and chairs outside. And the experience of going to the market is one of walking up and down, but also then sitting down, having a coffee and staring at the other people as they walk up and down before doing that again. I wonder what happens if this report is a success, how we can further increase the quality of the experience in the centre of town. And I also think about the relationship to things like bunting and other sort of street furniture and how the market will have a relationship with that. And if I could say one more thing, I've noticed in the market at the moment that the sales really detract from the visual appeal of the market. And I know written into the plan is a stipulation on sales, but I think there's something to be considered in the relationship between the gazebos and how they look and the sales that then get put up on each stall. So it's a question and observation, but it's important.
Yeah, I just say a couple of words, and then I'm sure Mr. Costello will have something to say as well. We are looking to rebrand the market, and we have looked at several designs for new gazebos to make it look more attractive and to be a bit more sort of cohesive and all work together. And we have actually looked at sales as well, I believe. But I agree that we need to have sort of a theme, if you like, that is then reflected along the whole length of the high street. I think under the Welcome Back Fund that we had from the government, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Costello, we did actually provide tables and chairs for a number of establishments to, this is obviously the catering businesses, within premises to actually have the ability to sit outside, and certainly they do. And in the square, you know, which Councillor Todd managed to get agreement from the county to close the square to traffic, and that's been hugely successful. And in an ideal world, we'd love to do more of that. We are a bit constrained in terms of where the market is, in that it's quite a narrow high street. But I'm sure if there's any further potential to have tables and chairs outside, then you know, we can certainly look at that.
And just to add to that, in terms of the look and feel and the experience of the market was something we knew as officers and fully recognised, but also was very much echoed in the independent review that we carried out, and of which the findings we brought to the Business Housing Policy Committee last year, and that has underpinned a lot of this policy writing and a lot of the plans for the future. In terms of embedding the market in a wider sort of place-making piece for sort of the wider experience of users for the high street, very much that is our view and our plan, and we sort of echo that a little bit in the vision, but also the fact that the market is sitting within the economy and tourism teams, that, you know, that indicates that you know, that fits very well with our sort of various work streams that we already do within that sort of agenda and landscape already.
Exceptionally, Councillor Prest, come back at that if you like.
Sorry, I apologise for the exception. I forgot to mention that actually, building on what Mr. Tate said, possibly that area of the upper high street, which is wider and has more kind of eating cafe establishments in it, might be a good place to experiment with that kind of interaction between the stalls and restaurants.
Just to let everybody know, we are likely to have a few extra stalls during the Christmas period at the top of the high street. The market manager has asked whether we would allow that, and we did last year, so I'm guessing we'll agree to that. I take your point about it. It is a wider area, but I think I can't remember the reason why we didn't continue with stalls up there. I think it was because at the time the traders weren't that happy with the stalls out there. I'm not sure. I may have got that wrong. No? Okay. Sorry. I don't know. Don't know the answer. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Councillor Edwards has been waiting patiently for some time.
Thank you, Chair. I like this paper very much. I've had privilege of a number of discussions over the last year or so with Councillor Thompson and other people involved in delivering it, and I can see that there is great potential to further improve the market that we have in Winchester. Lots of great ideas here. But I just want to express in the margins of all that a slight niggle, which is that it's a baby and bathwater issue, I suppose. Markets can be wonderful, creative, place-making experiences, but at their heart, the market is where you go to get a bargain. It's where you go to get your daily needs at an affordable price, maybe a bit cheaper than you could get them in the shops. That's the history of markets in England and probably elsewhere. So at a time of cost of living crisis, I think we mustn't lose sight of the fact that for many people, certainly for some people, it is important that the market is offering something that they can afford. And I see the qualitative assessment talks about quality of goods, comparability with the high street, and I guess goods for sale meeting local need or demand is where that affordability criteria needs to be reflected. I'm sure it will be, but I just thought it was worth pointing out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. I mean, I would just personally add, having plugged the Thai food shop, that there's an excellent butcher selling very reasonably priced meat. For those of you who don't eat meat, there's a really good fruiterer and greengrocer straight opposite as well, selling fruit and veg, often considerably cheaper than Sainsbury's, which is right outside. Councillor Thompson, did you want to respond to Councillor Edwards's point?
No, I completely take on board what you say, and certainly that will be part of the mix when we look at you know, the weighting criteria. I mean, I know it's set out in here, but certainly we will be minded to keep that at the forefront as well. Thank you.
Councillor Learning.
Thank you. I think we're all aware that quite a lot in Winchester is changing, particularly with the central Winchester regeneration. I think the point's already been raised about the need to be able to move through the market more easily. Obviously, as the cabinet member responsible for transport, I'm responsible for cycle routes, which goes straight through the market. And at the moment, it's impossible for a cyclist to go through there. It's hard even to push your bike. I go round the one-way system, which is not ideal, and many people won't. With the changes that are coming in central Winchester, the changes that are coming through the movement strategy, we've already got the traffic regulation order out to allow cycling down Middlebrook Street, for example, which will be a change coming through. What are we doing to make sure that the location of the market and how it operates fits in with the changes that are coming? Will the contract be flexible enough to deal with all of that?
Well, just very briefly, yes, it will be flexible, because obviously at the moment we've got stalls right outside Debenhams, and that is going to come back into use at some point, and those stalls will have to move. We'll have to look at other locations. So I don't know whether Mr. Costello has anything to say.
Yes, in terms of market layout, and as Councillor Thompson mentioned about Debenhams, and in the policy, you can see we've indicated temporary features as well, which is around that area. So we are very minded of what the actual layout looks like now and what it might need to look like in future periods of time as our sort of city landscape changes. And that is that will be part of the contract arrangements with the incoming operator. And one of the things that we'll be doing during the transition plan in the first 6 months, we'll be actually looking at sort of, that market layout and where the pinch points are, because the policy very clearly sort of indicates access and so forth, but also about, where the main footfall routes are and where, as a result of Central Winchester coming, how will that change how the city works, etc. So we do have that in our sort of longer term vision.
Councillor Todd.
I suppose that slightly ties into the next question. I mean, it came up in the context of talking about movement to the top of the high street, which is, we know quite a lot about where the high volumes are, where a lot of people need to move around. And there have been changes with, for example, I mean, if you look at the picture in the if you look at the picture at the front of the report, it had LK Bennett there, which is obviously no longer there and didn't have seating outside. And at the time, I think Got House, I don't think they had, that came later, that they put seating outside, something that really happened in COVID and has not gone away. And I just wondered if you were looking at a sort of almost criteria-based system. It's quite normal when you're designing highways to start saying there's a minimum width that it needs to be possible for people to get through. So is the intention to have some principles to help guide us in laying out the stalls as situations change and different businesses, for example, I don't know, decide to put out seating? Because again, there's now seating in the lower part of the high street put out by several of the businesses there that wasn't there before. So I'm just wondering what the plan is. Also, is there a plan to coordinate with pavement licenses and other such activities? How will it be managed? Because it needs to, I don't think we're in a position to draw a map and say this is what it's going to be like forevermore. We need to have some principles that help us work out where stalls go, because we know market managers will always ask for more, and we need to be able to have some criteria effectively to say, well, these are our minima in terms of width to enable flow of people, ability to have cyclists get through, albeit at times on foot rather than cycling. Is that part of the plan?
Absolutely, Councillor Todd, and that's where I was saying earlier on that we've now got sort of GIS mapping of the market layouts at the moment. And as you say, in the last sort of 2 or 3 years, the amount of outside seating has significantly changed. So it needs to remain relatively fluid, but it needs to be bedded in a set of principles, as you say, around particular space and usage of space and access. And so the next steps of that market layout plan will be to indicate exactly where the access routes are, the width of the access routes, to, as Councillor Becker was highlighting as well, to ensure that there is access for all users, for wheelchair users, for all sort of users of the market, but also have that market layout plan adaptable, that reflects the future changing of the sort of the landscape and the use of our sort of high street as well. So we do have all that in mind. We haven't yet sort of done the actual sort of planning bit, exactly what that's going to look like, but that is something that we would be looking to agree and introduce with the operating market operator going forward.
Is the intention to have some of those principles, maybe not all of them, but some principles outlined in writing, so we know what we're agreeing to?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got the framework in terms of the market operating policy already, and that will be further developed in terms of, as you say, a set of principles in terms of the actual layout, and how big a space needs to be and what the access spaces need to be, because that isn't clear at the moment. And absolutely recognise and echo that not just the market operator, but the market traders are very happy to bleed beyond their areas. So we're very clear and very minded on that.
Thank you. Councillor Tippett-Cooper.
I suppose just an evolution of that question from Councillor Todd is, within this, how are you able to speak to how we engage with market users as part of the policy and try to ensure that we are meeting the needs, the wants, the desires of Winchester's people in terms of what they want from their market in their high street.
Yeah, absolutely. In the work that we will do with the ongoing operator, once these sort of policies start to move into the transition period, will be to be testing sort of how that is being accepted by the market traders, but also the users of the market. We've done a lot of evidence-based research already that has indicated to us, potentially what is likely to sort of work well in a market in Winchester and what isn't. We haven't done direct resident and consumer usage research at the moment because we wanted to get these founding principles in place for which then we can test those as they start to be delivered through a transition period with users of the market. We are very minded that we will be monitoring this very closely, because if we feel we've made a decision that then isn't landing well with the users, we will want to make sure we are agile enough to make those changes that we mitigate any ongoing risk to the market going forward.
Thank you very much. If there are no further questions, just conscious I've called out 3 stalls. I could offer debate if members would like to call out any particular stalls they enjoy. So is there any debate on this paper?
I love the biltong lady.
That's one for the biltong lady. Thank you very much, Councillor Becker. Wonderful. Thank you. If I could refer members, were you raising a hand there, Councillor Cooper?
I just wanted to say commend the report and say it's an excellent and glowing. It's very exciting that the street market, there's a plan for it, it's going to evolve, and it's just another really good sign of how Winchester's High Street as it is actually really thriving. So.
Wonderful, thank you. If I could ask members to turn to page 35, the recommendations are before you. They were really just for us to comment. I feel we have done that, so can I take it as agreed that members have had opportunity to comment on the paper? Fantastic, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Costello. In a slight change to the bill, if I could invite Mr. Hickman to come forward to talk about agenda item number 9, please, which is a verbal update on parking. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, it's just an opportunity really to update members on the agency agreements we have with Hampshire County Council. I'm sure most members know that we have a number of agency agreements in place. They've been in place for many years. 2 of them in particular in relation to traffic management and on-street parking. So the County Council decided about 1.5 years ago to take these agency agreements back. Not just from us, but from all of the districts in the county. So they pulled them all back into their central management. And the Traffic Management Agency returned to Hampshire County Council in April. That was the one that enabled us to progress parking restrictions and yellow lines and things like that on the highway. So we lost that in April. That's gone back to the county. And the next stage of that process is the on-street parking management and enforcement agency, which is due to go back to the County Council on the 1st of October. So it's looming. And we've been planning for this for about 1 year now in terms of restructuring our teams, separating out all of our work streams, because we will still retain the off-street car parks. It's just the on-street that goes back to the county. So in terms of what this will affect, this affects all on-street enforcement across the whole district from the 1st of October. This will all be managed and undertaken by Hampshire County Council, and they will be using a private company acting on their behalf called NSL to do that enforcement for them. So unlike us who employ our own civil enforcement officers, they will be using a private company to do their enforcement. It will also include the management and administration of the Winchester on-street parking residence scheme. That will pass back to County Council, and that is a big area of our current work in terms of managing that and the 4,000 or so residence park permits that we currently issue. On-street parking waivers and suspensions all go back to Hampshire County Council, and even things like the permits that are issued to members, amenity permits and carers permits for parking on the highway will all go back to the county council from the 1st of October. In terms of what will remain with us, with the city council, that's the management and enforcement of off-street car parks. So we have about 33, I think, off-street car parks across the district, which we will continue to manage. The only exception to that is the Derngate car park in Winchester, which is owned by the county council, and they took back management of that about a year or so ago. So that's the only car park they will manage in our district. In terms of public car parks, we will retain the others. So off-street parking season tickets. So all the season tickets that we currently issue in our car parks will remain with us. And I know it doesn't affect this forum, but just out of interest, the Wickham residence parking scheme remains with us because Wickham Square is in fact a public car park. So that remains with us. So we've been planning for this, and we have kind of foreseen some potential issues. So we're putting in place some interim arrangements. One of them, for at least a year, is that all the off-street parkings and concessions that we currently allow for inner area residents who are entitled to a permit to park in car parks at weekends will remain. So we've written to our residents who are entitled to this, and we've told them that will stay in place for at least a year to give us sort of like a 12-month transition period to try and work out how we can do that, because there are complications around having two different enforcement agencies involved in that, obviously. So that's an interim arrangement that we put in place. We've also written to all of our permit holders, and those letters should have landed with them by now. They went out earlier this week. And everybody who's currently on a waiting list for a permit to inform them of the changes. And Hampshire County Council are going to write to everybody on Friday this week, so tomorrow in fact. So they will have our letter by now, and then they'll get the county's letter telling them what the new arrangements are. So in terms of the new scheme, focusing on the residence parking scheme, the county are going to run a similar scheme to the one that we run. But there are some subtle differences, and they have sort of allowed me to tell you about some of those before they've actually issued their letters, because they're going out tomorrow. So the biggest difference, I think, is it's a complete digital scheme. So there won't be any issuing of paper permits. It will all be done digitally. So that will be different for our residents, and that all has to be signed up and done online as well for residents. So that's quite a big change, and the county kind of run differently to us in that they don't have a reception area, and they don't have a dedicated phone line for this. So it is going to be different for residents. They're going to have to get used to this different system, but they will get a letter telling them all about this. Hopefully it will be smooth. There are some other changes. Electric vehicles, we give a concession for electric vehicles at the moment. That won't be given under the Hampshire scheme. This is really in relation to low emission vehicles. We do give a discount on the permits. They won't be doing that. They will require motorcyclists to have a permit as well. But apart from that, the scheme remains pretty similar to the one that's in place. So it should be fairly smooth in terms of the transition, and we hope with the interim arrangements we put in place that will also help. We've been briefing our customer service team because we do expect quite a few phone calls, so we've briefed them on all of this so they know what's coming, and hopefully, well, they will give all the right information out to everybody. And we're providing information to members through the Democratic Services update, which goes out on a Friday. And the final point I was going to make is that with the Christmas in Winchester, which is quite a very busy period for us, we, over the past few years, because we've had control over on-street parking, particularly in the Broadway, we've been able to manage all of that, remove on-street parking and manage it for coaches coming in and out. So we will lose that control, but we are liaising with the county about what we normally do. And they're saying that they're going to follow what we normally do. So it should all be smooth, and it should hopefully work as it has in the past. So I think that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll open the floor for questions in a second, just conscious that a lot of this will be within the gift of the county. So if members could restrict their questions to the communications from Winchester City Council and some of the stuff that Mr. Hickman's outlined so far, I think that would be appreciated. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. I noted your comment there. I've had a meeting with Andy Hickman and Councillor Lanley a little while back, so this question has already come across them, but I just want to make it public really. Parking restriction programs is quite vital for us to hand over to the county council. Do you think moving forward that we've obviously worked on a year or two programs that what we would probably submit if we were still doing the restriction zones and offering permits to various areas who have got parking problems? Do you think moving forward that the county council will accept the year 1 and year 2 program moving forward? I mean, I'm mindful specifically of the last part of Stanmore, which is still out of restrictions, and that's the south of Stanmore. But obviously, there'll be other areas in the Winchester district who've probably been in the program year 1 or in the program year 2. So, what would be the take on the county? The only other thing I would also ask is what would be the debate with the city council members, because sometimes we'll need access if the streets are enforced by county council staff contractors now, and we may be needing our vehicles all day long on our estates. How do we operate as members? It's not so much as parking in town for meetings here, but how do we operate on our estates if suddenly we've got contractors wanting to put penalty tickets on our windscreens? Thank you.
Mr. Hickman.
When the county served notice on us for the traffic management agency, we put together a programme which was agreed at one of our decision days in terms of what we would complete in terms of traffic regulation orders and what was on our reserve list, which we had to pass to the county. So we did put that all in order, and we did pass that on to the county council. I have to say that the county's policy, because even when we had the agency agreement, the county still dictated the policy to us in terms of what we could and couldn't put parking restrictions down for, and that was already changing in that they were telling us to move away from sort of residential areas parking and addressing that, and to focus more on safety. So that was already beginning to change, and we were already being questioned about schemes like Stanmore. So although we have passed that on to the county council, we don't have any control over that. It would be down to other members to influence the county in terms of what their priorities are going forward. On the members' permits for on-street parking, we have negotiated with the county that those existing permits can carry on being used. We don't know for how long, but we are going to put some details in the DSU on Friday tomorrow, just to say, members, keep your paper permits, keep them in your windscreens, because they will be honoured for a period of time. We're hoping that will be for 12 months, but we're still trying to hammer out that agreement. So if that changes, we will let you know. But for the time being, you can carry on using your permits.
Thank you, Mr. Hickman. Councillor Scott, does that answer your question?
One thing, clarity, I suppose. Did some of the traffic engineer staff that used to be with the city, have they moved over to the county? So has that built in a bit of coherence? What's this word? Coherence between the two authorities now to make it a smoother transition that we could hope for?
Yes, two traffic management engineers did transfer to the county council in April. In terms of the on-street agency, we won't be transferring any staff. We have reduced the establishment. But what's happened between the notice being served on us and the start date is that we've lost members of staff, and we've managed those vacancies rather than recruiting new people. So we won't be transferring any parking staff, CEOs or back office administration staff. But we've factored that in terms of we've been briefing the county on this scheme for the last 6 months. We have regular meetings with them, and we've got arrangements in place where we will carry on working alongside them to make sure they know exactly how the scheme works. So we've kind of put measures in place to address that.
Councillor Morris, did you have a question?
Yeah, one of the which the council's policies is to improve the environment for the area, and obviously as part of that we want to encourage people to switch to electric vehicles as much as possible. And my question is whether, when allocating street parking, whether if electric vehicles, people who have electric vehicles need to reliably know that they'll be able to park outside their house so that they're able to charge it. And I just want to check whether that consideration when giving parking permits will be transferred to Hampshire County Council and it will remain a consideration, will I get lost?
I think that the county have said that they're not going to give discounts for those type of vehicles. But having said that, the cost of the permits are only at the £50 level. So it's not a huge discount people were getting anyway. But I think with that, I think the bigger issue that we've got is giving people in houses which don't have off-street parking the provision or the ability to charge their vehicles. And we are working with the county on that. And the county council have been allocated some government funding. We're just trying to work out when that's going to be available. But it will be available in the next year or so to put on-street chargers in locations around, in places where you don't have off-street parking. I can see it being quite difficult to do. And they have done some trials already using electricity supplies from streetlights. So they have done some trials in Winchester. But that's the plan, to roll that out to make it easier for people. And there will be money available for that as well.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful. And I know it's an issue that residents in St Michael Ward raise often, particularly in the area around St Cross, where there are terraced housing, very limited off-street parking, but people would like to be able to charge their electric vehicles. So that is really helpful and reassuring. Are there any other questions for Mr. Hickman? That's a no. Thank you very much. That's very helpful. Thank you. If I could invite Mr. Kennedy to come forward, please, and we'll move to agenda item number 8. So backwards in your pack, starting from page 83. Can I ask Mr. Hickman or Councillor Lerney who would like to talk us through the paper, please?
Thank you.
Councillor Lerney.
Yes, although my name is on here as the Cabinet Member for Climate Emergency, the reason it's really my paper is because I chair the Town Forum finance group. So it's in that role rather than my Cabinet Member role that I'm speaking on this. I'll leave Darren to talk about the detail, but I mean, we do have quite a few new members here today, but those who were here at the beginning of the year will know that when the previous town budget was agreed, it was evident that the projections showed that high inflation was putting extreme pressure on the town budget for at least the next few years. And for those of you who are new to this, they're probably unaware that the town itself has relatively few money raising options. Most of what we offer in terms of chargeable services is community facilities such as, you know, football pitches. We operate the cemeteries. Most of those things where we get some money in, we actually end up paying more out than comes back in again. So we're not in a position to really raise significant funds from that point of view. And in addition, we operate under the government's capping regime, whereas parish councils can, in effect, precept their way out of trouble. We have to operate within, in effect, the budget we have. Those people who are aware of the previous budget will see that actually we have significantly improved the projections. If you look at the appendix, although it's still red over the next few years, we're only a few percent in the red rather than significantly in the red. And we have agreed that we will manage that through a number of further reviews. We have already reprofiled playground expenditure, which is what has changed the budget profile, but we do have a significant work to do in looking at open spaces and cemeteries, and it is likely that we will have to make difficult decisions in the next few months to close the remaining budget gap. So I'll hand over to Darren for the detail.
Thank you very much. Okay. So yes, so following on from that, this is kind of the first budget paper as part of a suite of 3 for this year. So this is an introduction setting the scene for the budget process. There's an update in Appendix 1 of the medium-term financial projections. The next paper will come to November Town Forum, which will give budget options for consideration, and then the final paper will come in January, which will be the final recommendations from the town regarding its budget and also precepts for next year to go on to Cabinet and Council in February. So this paper does give an update. There is an update on the play area refurbishment programme, which was one of the 4 projects which were identified last year as the major review areas that the town wished to look at in order to make significant dents in the budget shortfalls which were showing when we went through the budget process last year. The play area refurbishment is ongoing as a project review, as the other 3 areas are as well. But the figures in Appendix 1 have been updated on a draft basis because the profiling of the play area schemes have been reviewed as part of the initial phase of that project. But obviously there's still significant work to do on that, and the options will come forward. I think there's another paper which will be due to November Town Forum, where serious debate on the options within that paper will be held. So in terms of the challenge, obviously the financial strategy target of having an earmarked reserve balance of 10% of net expenditure remains. That's also going to be reviewed as part of this process to ensure that that remains an adequate target. Appendix 1 shows that whilst an improved position on last year, that still shows that we will fall below that reserve target level during 2024-25. So as Councillor Learney says, the challenges are still there and decisions will need to be taken as part of this budget process to ensure that the town maintains a balanced position and maintains adequate reserves over the medium term. Obviously the precept will be considered as part of the process as well. Forecasts take into account an estimated precept increase of 3%, but that will be for member decisions going forward. But that's within the forecast at the moment. Obviously we don't know exactly what government will allow in terms of how much the precept could increase by, but that's a reasonable estimate of the overall level of precept increase across the district and town. 3% would be a reasonable estimate to make at this stage, but some consideration of that will be made as well. So I mentioned the 4 main project areas, and those are under section 11.8, which gives a brief update on those and when those projects are going to come back to the town forum for consideration. There's also a brief update on the community infrastructure levy, which has had papers going to Cabinet recently too. To July Cabinet presented an update of community infrastructure levy across the town and district. Fees and charges, albeit there are not a huge number of fees and charges within the town area, those will be considered as part of the review as well. So those are mainly cemeteries and open spaces, which include sports pitches and tennis courts. So those levels will be reviewed as part of the process as well. And there's a sensitivity analysis in 11.2 because obviously a number of the pressures caused by the town have been inflation over the past year. That has remained higher than expectations, and so therefore there has been a slight increase in forecasts within this paper, within Appendix 1, and obviously there remains sensitivity around there. Hopefully the risk around that is slightly lower, but as we've seen, things can change, so that will be kept under consideration too. And I think that's everything for me. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. That was a really helpful walkthrough. I think we can all see the difficult position we're in with respect to inflation over the longer term than I think we thought we would have. Questions from members, please. Such a stark position that no one can drum up any questions. I think, well, a question for me, and I think this one, Councillor Learney, perhaps. There is a lot of you yourself referred to some difficult decisions we're going to have to make, but yeah, I think it would be nice to just celebrate some of the successes and some of the positive things that we can contribute to the town. So I would really appreciate if you could just remind members to cheer everyone up about some of the good stuff that we actually do, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to say that obviously we provide a lot of the fun stuff that people do in terms of parks and recreation, those sports grounds. I would recommend that you take a wander out to the King George V playing fields at the moment, because the new pavilion there is looking absolutely magnificent, and it's taken a significant amount of town money to bring that forward, but certainly we're delighted with the way it's looking, and that will be, you know, a magnificent contribution to the city in the future. We're still projecting that we will be able to carry on with things like the night bus, which is obviously something that is very helpful in parts of the town, and it would be great if we could actually look at expanding that provision, particularly for weekends. I won't make Councillor Batho declare an interest at that point. So, and the other thing that we are doing as part of that look at the cemeteries, and I think our cemetery management is something which should be celebrated, is how we might be able to manage it not only more efficiently but in a more nature friendly way. We've been doing that in a number of our cemeteries, and that's been very successful in improving biodiversity. You know, and I think that is something which we'll definitely want to do going forward. Again, when we're looking at the recreation grounds, we do have big plans for the future. And certainly one of the things that we're not proposing doing at the moment is using our community infrastructure levy to underpin routine stuff. We still want to use that infrastructure levy for things like the KGV pavilion, for things like implementing the River Park plan, which has some really exciting things in it, but we will obviously need to have a look at that as we go forward. So I think there is, as you say, quite a lot to celebrate. We're still doing a lot of good stuff. It's just that we will have to be looking after the pennies as we go forward.
Thank you very much for that uplifting contribution, particularly around cemeteries. Who'd have thought that would be something that would really cheer everyone up? But thank you. Has that spurred any questions from members, please? No. Well, thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Kennedy. I will offer an opportunity for debate, because you know, this is quite an important subject. No. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Thank you. So we now move, sorry, I should mention that we do have a recommendation, page 83, before we do move on, which was just to note the financial projections at Appendix 1. And Mr. Kennedy outlined the timeline for budget approval, which will come to the next town forum in November. Can I take that as approved? I'll do. Thank you very much. So could we move on now to agenda item number 10, which is on the play refurbishment programme. So if I invite Steve, Mr. Lincoln up to the table, and also note that Councillor Becker, his name is on this paper as well. So would you like to kick off, please? Thank you. Just walk us through this paper.
You can go.
Thank you, Chair. Town Forum's requested reviews of certain areas of expenditure to identify ways in which costs could be reduced, as discussed with Mr Kennedy in the previous paper. This interim report sets out the work undertaken to date on one of those reviews, the play area refurbishment programme. Current 5-year programme has a budget of 714,000 for 8 play areas. First 2 of these, which are River Park and KGV, are either completed or sort of well in process. So our initial research is focused on the remaining 6 sites. Current approach is for each site to be refurbished approximately every 20 years, at which point it's completely removed, including all surfacing ancillary equipment such as benches and bins, and a new play area put in its place. This means some equipment gets replaced despite being perfectly serviceable. This is supported by some life expectancy assessments we've had done on the 6 sites, which showed that some equipment due for replacement in the next few years is actually likely to last for at least 10 more years. So we considered 4 different levels of replacement or repair, as detailed in section 11.7 of the report. This started with a continuation of the current approach, which we've labelled as option 1, through to a very basic level of work, which we've labelled as option 4, which would see only the oldest and most tired of the equipment being replaced. The cost estimates were based on current catalogue prices, which aren't wholly reflective of the actual cost to us for a number of reasons. So the figures in there in this report are purely indicative, but they do show enough to tell us that continuation of a full replacement would cost even more than the current budget allows, and clearly the forum's asked us to actually try and find some reductions in that budget, and that's impacted in particular by rising costs that we're all aware of. In contrast, the cost estimates for the most basic level of work suggest the cost of the programme could be reduced very significantly. Appendix 2 gives a sample for one of the sites, just kind of giving you an idea of some of the level of detail that's been involved in the review work today. We didn't feel it was necessary to kind of provide all that detail for every site, but it just at least gives you a flavour of the sort of thinking that's been happening. So we aren't yet in a position to indicate detailed budget requirements, but the work that's been done and the detail in this report gives us some confidence that we'll be able to present you with options that will contribute significantly to addressing the forum's budget challenges, again, as reflected by Mr Kennedy in the previous report, while maintaining a portfolio of high quality play areas, which is obviously really important and which I know the forum will want to see. The revised programme that we bring back to the forum eventually will incorporate this approach of retaining certain pieces of equipment for longer where possible, but will also sort of include an approach of deferring work so that costs are not just reduced but also pushed back to a later date where possible. This will be made possible by the continued use of the life expectancy assessments that I already mentioned, which do require a small amount of additional expenditure but will enable savings of a much greater magnitude. This work's been discussed at 2 meetings of the forum's Parks and Recreation Informal Group in recent months, chaired by Councillor Batho. We'll continue to work with that group as we develop more detailed proposals, and we'll bring those forward for consideration at the forum meeting in November. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Becker, are there any comments you would like to add to that?
I think that was very, very thorough. 2 points. One, Abbey Gardens, which I know everyone is familiar with, it's noted in the paper, but just to confirm that Abbey Gardens is paid for out of the general fund, not the town fund. So it's not included in this, but I have to say the refurbishment is amazing. The replacement of the River Park playground is complete. It's also fantastic. The hamster wheel is my children's favourite thing in the city right now. It also is fantastic, and that's part of the implementation of the park plan as well. So it is a demonstration to residents that we are getting on with these things as and when we can. I think it's also worth noting the environmental benefits of an enhanced maintenance refurbishment rather than a wholesale replacement of an entire playground when it's unnecessary. And in these times of the climate emergency, that's also a really, really important consideration. Finally, I'd just like to say that the options that we are setting out here highlight the importance of the play areas to the town forum, to me as the cabinet member. It's these areas offer physical benefits for children, also for older people. They offer mental health benefits for parents, where it's a place where you can meet and speak to other people and form some sort of community and have conversations while your children are running riot around you. We saw during COVID at just how important playgrounds were when they were closed, and suddenly people realised just how important they were to them. They also offer green spaces within the city. They often have lots of trees around, so that there's a biodiversity impact as well. So we are really doing our best to maintain these and keeping, I know Councillor Thompson is always very effusive in her praise for the play areas, saying that they are some of the best in the country. So we really do want to maintain that as far as we can. And so this is a demonstration of our commitment to our play areas while recognising the budgetary constraints that we find ourselves under at the moment.
Thank you. And I would just add to that, yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree. We've had family come down from all over the country and always remark on how good the play facilities are in Winchester. So that's really, really pleasing to hear. Are there any questions on this paper? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Yes, I've just got one question, and it's on Appendix 1. And I know what you say about when you're going to refurbish, the options that you're going to consider, and whether to refurbish a whole playground or just do part of it. But I just wanted to ask a cheeky question, really, on number 9, Talavera Road. It's a playground that we took over from A2 recently, and I have to say ward councillors were absolutely delighted that we did take it on. And it is in a fantastic setting. However, parts of the equipment have really seen better days. The slide is no longer there, and the sort of little climbing bit is really broken and not very pleasant. And I just wonder when those sort of repairs can actually be carried out. That'd be great.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Yeah, we are aware of Talavera Road and some of the condition of some of the equipment there. The Appendix 1, we considered putting more detail in at this point, in some more detail in terms of a bit of condition work that we're aware of in terms of the sites, and also some projections about possible dates and years when work might happen. We decided not to include it because actually it's still a bit premature to do that. We're still doing more work, which we should have gone through by the time we come to you in November. And what wouldn't have been helpful was putting in some ideas that then actually prove we need to move around and juggle around. So we are aware of Talavera Road. Some of that work could be funded through, we obviously have a reactive maintenance budget. So some of the work could be funded through that. It's also possible that that once there's a sort of better understanding of the condition of the equipment there, it might be that Talavera Road needs to come up the list a little bit. Like you said, we have very recently taken it on after a long and protracted process and negotiation. So it may be one that we need to review, but it will obviously need to do that as part of the whole programme review, bearing in mind the need to phase the costs in a way that help meet the financial challenges that the forum's facing. So,
Councillor Learning.
Thank you. One of the things when we're looking at the budget that we've recognised as part of the reduction in the overall playground replacement programme is that we probably will need to put a greater amount of money into the reactive repairs budget, so that we can make sure that when suddenly we find equipment comes to the end of its life, then we do have the funds where we can just go in and fix these things quickly. So hopefully in the future, actually by moving to this approach, not only will we be a bit greener, but we'll actually be able to go, this particular playground, we're just going to replace one item because it really has come to the end of its life. So we might see a bit more work on individual playgrounds actually over time, which might well go down quite well with residents, rather than ripping them all out entirely, but only every 20 years.
Councillor Tibbett-Cooper.
Yeah, just to follow on from that from Councillor Learning, I mean, I noticed at 6.2 that part of the consultation process was that consultation always is carried out with the local community before works are done, playground sites, and that's been very successful, not least in River Park, where the most popular equipment. I think the hamster wheel was the was something the kids suggested, and it just goes to show how popular it was. But in making these decisions, I was wondering whether there was, I suppose, within the process, the possibility of where there's a piece of equipment, for example, that yes, it's old, yes, it's tired, but actually it's very popular and it's still safe, whether that will be a factor in any decision making of certain parks, because there are certain pieces of equipment in parks that are very old but are very popular. So.
It's a really good point well made. One of the things that we're still thinking about and working on, and I think will probably need to be an evolving and a bit of a learning process, will be how exactly we shape and form the consultation that takes place with this. Part of the danger associated with this is, as Councillor Lerney alluded to, that this may well lead us to an exercise which leads us to look at maybe a greater number of playgrounds in a particular year, but only do a little bit of work in each. So clearly that's the potential to create a lot more work in terms of consultation. So we just need to sort of work and balance that. We have talked with the informal group under Councillor Batho's chairmanship around how we do this. It's something that I think we're going to talk about some more as we go on through the year. We've also talked about something that we want to do quite soon, which is around engaging the members around the table to gain their insight into which areas are the real big hitters in their patches, which are the ones that are really popular, really serve the purpose, and just get a sense from you all in terms of your knowledge and understanding as well. So we absolutely know that we need to do some more thinking around that, but really important. Absolutely, what we don't want to do is go taking out the most popular piece of equipment in the park, for sure.
And it absolutely warms my heart that in Abbey Gardens, the train is the single most popular piece of play equipment. Councillor Scott.
And as a replacement from one that was there before, it's the only thing that got replaced, and it's almost an absolute copy of the one that was there before, because everyone loves trains.
Indeed so. Councillor Scott.
I was going to ask Steve Lincoln some questions, but I just want clarity. Did Councillor Becker say not all money comes out of the town forum? I think it was some comes out of the general part.
Abbey Gardens is the only one, because Abbey Gardens is seen as a district facilities.
Not for anything else. That's a shame, because I want to spend some more money. Okay, Steve, thank you for the list of play areas. I've been asking for some time more detail of open space stuff that's in there, because some families will obviously have youngsters when they're going out, and sometimes they've got YPs. And I know that some of the recs now have got some really good YP provision, skate parks, muggers, BMX tracks and whatever. So moving forward, it'd be interesting how we dovetail play areas and get in the YP thing, because I know fashion is coming and go. I've got the lovely county councillor Hiscott here. When he was on town forum, a few of us went a trip around sort of other council areas. And I think we did okay, didn't we, Winchester? But we did sort of nick some ideas from other areas and sort of enhanced some of our play areas and whatever. Perhaps when we had a bit more money and so forth. But moving forward, I think what we don't want to do, or could we avoid, is the question: could we avoid not trying to fully engage with the community about a full enhanced new area if the money's there, because it gives children and parents an opportunity for specific play areas to get the latest. Companies come with really some fantastic ideas. Fairmont Crescent recently had some wonderful things put in there, and it was only 3/4 done. It wasn't a fully thing, and then we ended up with a green slide because we had a big mound of earth and so forth like that. So what we don't want to do is create a situation where we just do bit stuff and nothing really looks good, and it doesn't give an opportunity for generation of new children to enhance that at their play area because they chose it. So can we sort of avoid that danger moving forward?
That I suppose is the kind of conundrum that we're facing here. The kind of the approach you described is kind of the one that we've been doing for some time, and it's one which at the moment the forum is struggling to resource. I think this this sort of change to do this is going to need to be a bit of a learning process as we go. I think what we can do, we're the other thing we're looking to do, and we haven't really got into it in this paper, we'll touch on it more in the November one, is look to create more of a rolling 5-year programme. So that I think what the approach up until now has been we'd agree a 5-year programme, we'd run through that programme, and then we'd create a new 5-year programme. What we want to do is try and be reviewing this year on year, because we're going to have to see how this work, how effective this is, to make sure that we are making the cost reductions in the programme that you're looking for, to make sure that the engagement and the consultation is still effective. And given that we're going to be looking at equipment on a more granular level rather than just ripping it all out on each site and going back in again, we're going to need to be checking those sites that are coming forward in the next few years. We're going to need to be checking them, looking at these life expectancy reports and making sure that equipment isn't going to be failing, you know, in the next 6 months, 12 months. We need to be doing that. So I think we're going to need to look and learn as we go. It's going to be a challenge to meet the forum's kind of financial wishes while still taking the approach of kind of wholly replacing a site. And I agree with you completely. I think, you know, it does enable us to bring in, you know, new thoughts and new themes, and have the new cohort of young people really engaged in what that playground looks like. So we want to try to not to lose that, but clearly we're going to need to move towards an approach where we are not replacing everything. So yeah, totally take on board the sentiment, and we want to build that in as part of this consultation, this engagement, to make sure people still really feel a sense of ownership. And kind of building on that comment that was made earlier, maybe about trying to take a sense from the local community about which pieces of equipment are really loved and cherished and well used, then, you know, hopefully we can almost engage people on that, hear what they're saying, and there's a really positive message here that actually we're keeping the things that people really enjoy and love. So we need to try and turn it into a positive. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Last question on this paper from Councillor Batho, please.
Yes, thank you, Stephen. I'd just like to thank you and the team for the work we've obviously done in the initial 2 meetings, and look forward to continuing that work through the rest of the year. It was really, in terms of responding to Councillor Scott's question, I think the team has been very, you know, sort of novel and sort of creative in the way that they've responded to the constraints that we're, you know, sort of putting in terms of budget. But I think that will have, as you say, a knock-on in terms of the actual expectations that the town forum and our residents have to have about what we can provide over the next, you know, sort of few years. And therefore, I just sort of suggest that we have some forbearance in terms of the, you know, sort of expectations that are placed. Certainly, the programme will not be as you know, sort of extensive in terms of each area that we are going to be sort of working on, but it means that the programme can cover all of the play areas and maintain the facilities for all of our residents within that constrained budget. So I'd just like to say thank you to Steve and the team for coming forward with that you know, sort of way of responding to the budget requirement. So thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Could I draw everyone's attention, please, the recommendations on page 93, which is to note the work that's been done up to this date, and also, much like the previous paper, that we will be having more substantive paper brought to the next town forum in November. So could I take those both as noted, please? Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Lincoln. We now move to the last couple of agenda items. The first one was an informal update from informal groups. Given we were just talking about parks, Councillor Batho, is there anything you would like to talk about from the Parks and Rec informal group, please?
No, as Mr. Lincoln has indicated, we've had 2 meetings, the results of which have now just been presented to the meeting. So I think rather than take any further time from the meeting, I'll just yeah, sort of again say thank you and look forward to the additional meetings we've got later in the year. Thank you.
And then the same question to Councillor Lerney. We've talked a lot about accounts this evening. I expect there's nothing further to add.
Yes, same answer, Chairman.
But then, Councillor Cooper, I know you have something to update the forum on from the Heritage informal group, please.
Yes, lock the doors, everybody. It's going to take a little while. No, I'm only joking. It's Chair. So yes, on the Heritage Group, we had a very good and positive meeting recently, and I have a few things to update the forum about. Firstly, the plan for the next municipal year is for the Heritage Group to focus on 3 key heritage projects within the town area, those being St Maurice's Tower, the Buttercross and Hyde Gateway, which the latter 2 have been subject to some focus in the previous year. There was a desire in the group that not only do we focus and look to get the project work on these 3 monuments really driving forward, but also to look generally at our heritage in the town area and help communicate as effectively as possible about them and their history, and working with the excellent heritage groups we have in the town area, including Hyde 900 and the City of Winchester Trust, for example, as well as our excellent Visit Winchester team, who already do a great job in terms of external promotion communication about Winchester and experience of it. In terms of the project work, St Maurice's Tower, a Grade 2 listed former church tower that abuts the former Debenhams building, for those who don't know. So there's work that is going to be required on this within the next 1 to 5 years following an inspection by a structural engineer. So we'll need to look into that. There's a small piece of masonry that's fallen from the roof apparently, which we need to be which happened previously, which is the sort of thing we want to avoid. We'll be looking at that site and updating throughout the year as to how progress is going and making sure that is looked after and also engaged with, because St Maurice's Tower is maybe known to some but not everyone. The Buttercross, known to everyone, I think, in Winchester. So the Buttercross is of course a scheduled monument, so that means any work we do on it requires consent from Historic England, acting on behalf of the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport. And following surveys that were conducted earlier this year and a inspection from Historic England this month, in fact, on the 4th of September, there's now a plan to look to repair, clean and pigeon-proof potentially that monument. So watch this space. It is dependent upon the consent from Historic England, and I won't go into all the ins and outs of what's being planned, but the rough timeline for it is that for an informal submission of the proposed restoration works of the Buttercross will be submitted by the end of 2023, with a review to receiving consent from Historic England, and it is dependent on them giving us consent, which they do need to, turn around quicker than they have been in the past, with a hope to commence the actual works to restore it in spring 2024. That's the planned timeline. Finally, Hyde Abbey Gateway, which is a very important project for me in particular. So again, scheduled monument needs the same consents. 4 key issues recently, or some of the key issues recently, have been the fact that we have resident pigeons in there. There was a lot of work to get a pigeon deterrent solution installed. Unfortunately, with buildings of this nature, sometimes things work for a while and maybe then don't work so well. And there's been a general agreement on the group that the pigeon deterrent solution that's currently in there hasn't been entirely successful. So the good news is, though, is that there will be a new installation of netting at roof truss level at no extra cost to Winchester City Council from the contractors that installed the previous deterrent. So hopefully the pigeons will be out again soon, as they've slowly and surely started to come back. Floodlights will be installed, repairs to the actual building itself, replacement of the decayed tarmac and the bollards, all of which was supported by Historic England in their meeting on the 4th of September. And finally, Historic England are very keen, as are we, following meetings with the Hyde 900, as well as inspections from councillors, to ensure we've got a greater interpretation of the history displayed in the gateway, and also the adjacent store to the to the structure, and all of that is all that work is going to be submitted to Historic England for approval, hopefully within the same timelines as the Buttercross. So that's what the group we're focusing on. A lot of work to do, but we're going to try and do it for you, Chair.
Do it for the people of Winchester. Brilliant stuff. It's excellent. Really full work programme. Excellent. And then last but not least, the Informal City Centre Group, Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I mean, how do I follow medieval church towers and buttercrosses and all the rest of it with waste bins? That's how I follow it. And actually without any apology, because I want to talk a bit about commercial waste bins in the city. And I think I'd speak certainly for the St Michael's councillor team and probably others to say that this really matters to our residents, as well, of course, as to our businesses. So the council continues to work closely with Winchester BID to improve the management of commercial waste in the city centre, which has become more challenging as the number of food and beverage outlets increases. I mean, they generate a huge amount of waste compared with a shop of the same size. It's planned that we will be dealing with the bins in the paved area between St George's Street and God Begot House, which have been an eyesore and probably a nose sore for a long time. The plan is to install a new bin store to lessen their impact. So they're not entirely, but largely invisible to passers-by on George Street, certainly. The work will be completed by March next year, so within the current financial year. And the council also plans to extend the bin store in the Cossack Lane car park so that fewer commercial bins are left overnight on city streets. Now, that's all fine, but in a sense, it's just putting a pattern up over current provision. And looking forward, a number of town forum councillors are very interested in exploring how the city might take a more holistic approach to commercial waste. We'd hope to encourage less waste in the first place, to have systems that meant there were fewer trips by vehicles to collect the waste, and of course that more of it was then recycled. So there's new partnerships required, a new way of thinking. I think that's going to happen overnight, but I think it's something that is really important for the city to, I won't say to get right, but to get better. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. And we had an excellent walk about the city, examining the various bin stores earlier this month with the cabinet member. That draws to a close the business, apart from to look at the future plan for the town forum, which is on page 115. I take it everyone is happy with that. Agreed. Good. Excellent. So I think I've done all the business. Simon is nodding. So thank you very much. Thank you for your time.